Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. I am your host, Richie. Here with my guy, Mr. Mike Zappi, out in San Antonio, Texas. On tonight's show, we're going to be hitting on the AFC North Division, possibly the best division in all of professional football. In this division, we have a team in the Baltimore Ravens that, in addition to being only one win away from last year's Super Bowl, has really had a great deal of success since arriving in Baltimore. They have 2 Super Bowl victories in their Baltimore history. We've got their most hated rivals, the Pittsburgh Steelers, tied for the most Lombardi trophies along with the New England Patriots. The Cincinnati Bengals are no strangers to Super Bowl heartbreak. They have been to 3, have yet to win 1. But with Joe Burrow under center, it is always a possibility. And one thing that Joe Burrow has going for him is that he has gotten the better of Patrick Mahomes in their young careers. The Cleveland Browns sport a hell of a defense, and they have been a little more of a playoff frequenter under Kevin Stefanski. The big question is, will Deshaun Watson be good enough to take them to the next level? And when they eventually get Nick Chubb back, will he be okay? A lot to sort out in this division. We will be back shortly. Enjoy this intro. We are back, Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast, making our tours around each and every NFL division. And tonight we land on the AFC North, one of the toughest divisions to forecast, but we're going to do our due diligence to break it down for all of you. If you haven't seen a division preview in the past, we start from the bottom and move it on up. And Zap, I got to say, the team that's on the bottom in this division, don't get used to seeing them there.
Yeah, man, and it's crazy because every year you look at all 8 divisions and you ask the question, which 4th place finishing team has the best opportunity to be a 1st place finishing team the following season? And this division is exactly it when you talk about the Cincinnati Bengals and what they can do coming back from last year, which was obviously a very, very down year. I mean, they went 1-5 in the division. That's just not good enough, but also had to go through the season with many injuries from Joe Burrow having to sit out a lot of time. And, it's a part of the game. But, man, I'm really looking forward to this division this year. I will say that much.
Yeah, looking at some of the Bengals pickups this year via free agency, I'll tell you the truth. The combination of Zach Moss and Chase Brown, I personally don't think you're going to lose a lot with the absence of Joe Mixon. I love Moss's game. In short sample sizes, he has proven that he could tote the rock. Going into this year, I imagine he will be the 1A, so to speak, running back. But Chase Brown, Canadian football background, he brings a lot to the table. And I like the combination. This is a team that I also think went out of their way to make sure I'll bring up the draft in just a moment, but even via free agency, that they gave the offensive line some much needed love. They've been at the middle of the pack Not the best, not the worst, but when you have an asset like a Joe Burrow throwing to the dynamic duo of T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, his former LSU teammate, you got to keep him upright. You got to keep him healthy. They do have a solid backup in Jake Browning, one of the better backups in professional football, a guy who I actually have confidence in if Joe should get hurt this year again. But go over some of these losses here real quick. I already mentioned Mixon. He is a Texan. DJ Reader is a Lion. Jonah Williams over with the Cardinals. Chidobe Awuzie, one of the fastest men, if not the fastest in the NFL. He's a Titan. Wide receiver Tyler Boyd joins him there. Via the draft, this is what I like what they did here. Marius Mims out of Georgia, one of the better offensive tackles in this draft. Chris Jenkins keeps the football lineage going in his family. Jermaine Burton, Alabama. McKinley Jackson out of Texas A&M. Tight end Eric All out of Iowa. He's going to be a playmaker. Josh Newton. This is a team that I feel needed to shore up the offensive line and their secondary. Offensively, you already know at the skill positions what they got cooking. You lose a household name in Joe Mixon, but you replace him with essentially two running backs that are going to try to equal, if not outdo, his production. I also like low-key like the Jasicki pickup as well as Sheldon Rankins on the other side of the ball. Two veterans in this league that have been good for a long time. Von Bell is a Bengal. I like it. I like what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think what we saw last year in 2023 with the Cincinnati team was a lot of the reason why they were losing games was because they were losing those games in the trenches. And what did they do? Obviously, we know they went and addressed the offensive line. I mean, something they've been trying to do for the last few years, going back to the Super Bowl meltdown against the Rams, where they allowed 8 sacks in that game. And, fast forward to this past year's draft, bringing in Marius Mims, a guy that's raw, but he looks like he could be the real deal there. And, I mean, he looks like he's probably going to be a right tackle. But even if they move him over to left tackle, if Orlando Brown does not work out, I think he's going to be a good draft pick for them. And then going and addressing Chris Jenkins, a guy that's going to be a rotational player early in his career, but will definitely be stepping into the starting lineup here within 2 to 3 years, I think is a good piece to come out and help out. But the one I actually liked the most was you lose Boyd and you go out and get Jermaine Burton. Not only are you getting a receiver with speed, you're getting a guy from Alabama. And we have seen over the last, 10 years that receivers from Alabama tend to translate very well in the NFL. And it also protects you because, yes, you do have T. Higgins back, which is going to be a one-year rental. We know T. Higgins is trying to get his bag. We also know Jamar Chase is going to try to get his bag. You can't pay them both. They've made it very clear that they are focusing on Jamar Chase, even though he's going into year 4. It's not often you see a receiver or a player holding out in year 4, especially when he still has that 5th-year option. I like Bengals team, man. We saw what happened to him last year, and it was just I actually thought it was going to happen. I remember last year I thought the Bengals were going to take a huge step back. They did. But now fast forward to this year, when you look at what they did via free agency and the draft, bringing in Zach Moss, I think it really does help make that loss of Joe Mixon that much easier. And it wasn't much of a loss because they traded the guy. They decided to let him go. I like what Cincinnati's going to do this year, man. I really do think that Slim Shady, Mr. Joe Burrow, is going to have himself a bounce-back year. Also, keep in mind, this is his first offseason, first training camp that he is going into the regular season healthy. Let me say that again. His first training camp going into the regular season where he is healthy. He has not been able to say that once in his career until now. And you look at what he has at the receiving core. The one thing I wanted to see this team do, I wanted to see them trade up and get Brock Bowers in that offense. We know where Brock goes to the Raiders, but if they would have been able to get Brock Bowers to team up with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, I think that offense would have been deadly, if not the deadliest in the NFL. So,
yeah, Bowers, there were a couple of teams that I feel Bowers could have went to. I thought the Jets very much so could have made sense there as well. But to your point, this is a team that for years featured the tight end, even in the beginning of the Burrow era.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have not been able to replicate that production. So, you know, you bring in a veteran in Gesicki, see if he has anything to still offer. You also bring in Tanner Hudson, who's low-key good. But it's I view that production is not going to be all that much. You're going to see the combination of Moss and Brown, I believe, really replicate the production, if not outdo Joe Mixon. To your point, they were ready to move on from him. The receiver dilemma, not an easy one, and it is rare for a guy to hold out in year 4. And I guess I should ask you this. How long do you think this holdout goes?
I mean, you've got to think that Jamar Chase will eventually show up because while I get it, you know, when you look at other players that are not first-round draft picks, they're trying to get their bag after year 3. But in Jamar Chase's case, you still have that 5th-year option, which is always a fully guaranteed option. And right now, that fully guaranteed, I mean, that salary looks pretty damn good for 2025. You know, I don't think they're going to allow him to hold out. I mean, and if you look at the way the schedule starts for them, hosting New England week 1, they can win that game with or without Jamar Chase. Let's get that straight first. But week 2, that's the true test. That'll probably be the game where if Jamar Chase is not suited up when they go to Kansas City, when they go to Burrowhead, you know, where they might have to sit there and say, bite the bullet, and hey, let's pay him. We need him out there. I hope he's suiting up by week 1, but I definitely hope he's suiting up week 2 because
you beat Kansas City without Chase. It don't help his case.
No, does not help his case at all.
Chris Jones in attendance last year when the Lions went in and beat the Chiefs. Within hours of that result, he had his contract.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes it takes something like that to happen.
Emmett and the Cowboys, take it back to the 90s for a second.
0-2 to start and finish the year 12-4, you know, and what did Jerry do? Hey, Emmett, let's get you paid. Let's get you suited up. Because it takes things like that. Because really, when you look at Jamar Chase's career in his first 3 seasons, him, Justin Jefferson, they're 2 of the greatest starting careers at the wide receiver position. And, you know, we can't sit here and say Jamar Chase is not talented. You got to take into consideration that Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow have been playing together since college. The chemistry is there. You don't want that chemistry to be broken up. That's the reason why you drafted Jamar so high. It's the reason why you drafted Joe Burrow so high.
At my behest, because we talked about fixing this O-line, right? On a previous show, we spoke about the NFC North, how important Penei Sewell is. Revisiting my days of the Jordan Patrick show, that particular draft, I was pleading with the Bengals, take Penei Sewell, take Penei Sewell. Joe Burrow's coming off a rookie injury that prevented him from winning Rookie of the Year. It went to Justin Herbert. But, you know, it looks like they shored up the line now, finally. Penei Sewell's doing great things. Obviously, Jamar Chase is doing great things. But I can't see Chase holding out that long because at the end of the day, if the organization isn't going to budge, you're hurting yourself financially.
Yeah, absolutely, because he's still playing on a rookie contract, and those fines are adding up. Eventually, you're going to sit here and say, oh, crap, my bank account is getting a little empty. I need to show up because these fines are going to continue to accumulate. You know, other thing to consider with this Bengals team, man, is, you know, this is a team that is only a couple years removed from playing the Super Bowl. Been to the AFC Championship game a few times. I mean, they're a good team that just took a step back. But the one thing about this year, they're playing a 4th place schedule. And a team like this playing a 4th place schedule is usually a team where it ends up turning out very well for you in that season.
I have a hunch that this team is not only going to win this division, but this team is also going to be in the mix for a 1 seed because of some of the stuff that you just alluded to. You play a bad Panther team. I don't know how bad my Giants are going to be. I'll tell you what, though. I know we're not no Super Bowl contender this year. You got the Raiders at home. That's a team you're going to beat. At Los Angeles. By then, I would like to think that Herbert and Harbaugh got their act together. That's a game you should win, though.
Game you should win.
You play the Steelers twice every year, obviously. You play the Ravens twice. You play the Browns twice. The Browns, no matter what, have had a propensity for having this Bengals team's number. But this is a year where Nick Chubb is not going to be healthy coming in. Way too early prediction for this Cincinnati Bengals team. I got them hovering right around that 13-win mark. I have this team potentially being the 1 seed. It's tough to be the 1 seed because of the kind of beatings you take in this division, but to your point, the 4th place schedule does alleviate some of that. I might be going a little high here, but I don't care. 13-4, and the 1 seed for the Cincinnati Bengals. Worst to first. It happens that quick, kids. This is a bona fide Super Bowl contender this year. Only injuries can knock them off their axis. And in this particular conference, you have to account for the Ravens as a contender that can knock off the Chiefs. But this team is a team that has already done that. Nobody else could say that in the AFC. They could. Tom Brady is retired. Those New England Patriots don't exist anymore. This is the only bunch of players that are running around together that can say that they went into Arrowhead and took down the big bad Chiefs. This Cincinnati Bengals team's for real, and last year is going to be a distant memory.
Yeah, and one of the things that actually works in the Bengals' favor, if Jamar Chase is not suiting up week 2, they do not win that game against Kansas City.
No.
And I when I look at Kansas City and I look at the Bengals, I think very well that these two teams could both finish the season 14-3, 13-4. But it's going to come down to that week 2 matchup. And you don't want to go into Arrowhead and lose that game. But the one thing working for them is Kansas City is hosting Baltimore to start the season on a Thursday night. It's going to be an emotional game. We saw what happened last year. We saw Brady and the Patriots start off the year 0-2. And we saw what they did afterwards coming back. I
have a weird hunch that I'm about to go on record on.
I think, look.
The Kansas City Chiefs not only are going to start the year 0-2, they're going to start the year with 2 home losses. They might turn around and rip off 11 straight, but I got them starting off the season 0-2. I am not joking.
That'd be interesting. I could see it. I could see it. I'm not betting against the Chiefs. I've already said it countless times. They have proven me wrong. And when I look at what they did in the offseason, all the additions they made, I think the Chiefs are going to be the 1 seed. But I think the Bengals will have, if not the same record, be 1 game off, and it comes down to that week 2 matchup. If Jamar Chase suits up, I could see Cincinnati going in there. I could see them outplaying Mahomes because Joe Burrow has made a tendency of doing it.
It's much more manageable as a visitor when you're catching these guys in September.
Mm-hmm.
I like the Ravens in week 1 for the sheer fact that it's banner night. They're the team they beat. And it's like, the Ravens are going to be introducing all kinds of new wrinkles now that Derrick Henry's part of the picture. It still might not mean anything at the end of the year, but I really like the Ravens in week 1, and I like the Bengals in week 2, under the premise that Jamar Chase is active. That is the main thing. I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah, when I look at this team schedule, whether even if they, week 1, sorry, Brett, you guys are going to get blown out.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be. I'm seeing a 38, and I'm seeing like a 10.
If they get to 10, that'd be impressive. Let's put it that way. But after Kansas City, Washington, that should be a win. Carolina should be a win. Baltimore at home should be a win. At New York, win. Cleveland, probably a loss because Kevin Stefanski does know how to coach against them. But then you get Philly at home, Vegas at home. At Baltimore, that will be a loss. They'll split with Baltimore. They'll split with Pittsburgh. They'll split with Cleveland. That's your 3 losses. Other than that, it comes down to that Kansas City game. That's the way I look at it. I think they're going to go into Dallas on Monday Night Football and win that game. I think it with this team, it comes down to, can Burrow go into Kansas City and can he beat the Browns?
And the other caveat is, can the Bengals avoid their usual slow start?
Oh, good point.
I think the big key there, and why they might change their fortunes this time around, you said it at the top of the hour. Burrow is healthy. This means absolutely nothing, but something that I got to say because it involves my team, and it's comical. The one thing the New York Football Giants have going for them on Sunday Night Football against the Cincinnati Bengals, no, it's not Daniel Jones's ultra-impressive primetime record. The New York Giants have never lost to the Cincinnati Bengals in New Jersey. Ever.
Better know that.
And up until a couple of years ago, the New York Giants never beat them in Cincinnati. But that was a Burrow-less Bengals team. They were injured. Burrow was hurt the week before that.
It's funny, too, because even when we were doing our NFC North preview talking about the Bears and the Packers, I mentioned the point where, the Bears just cannot beat the Packers. And this might be a simple case of that, too, where the Bengals cannot go into New York and win. And that's going to be a trap game.
If there's ever a year that it happens, this should be the year.
It should be the year. But hey, any given Sunday, we have seen some crazy things happen. I will say that. But I'm saying it right now. I have them as a 13-4 team. The number 2 seed in the AFC will be battling the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. And it comes down to one thing and one thing only. You're going to have to win one game in Kansas City. If I'm playing for the Bengals, I want it to be that playoff game and not week 2.
Oh, I hear you, but why not do it twice? I'm going. We haven't done the West yet, but I'm gonna tip my hand a little. I got the Bengals with the same record, but as the 1 seed. So I guess you could figure out who I think's winning week 2. And I already alluded to that I think the North is going to go 2-0 to start against the Kansas City Chiefs. On to a team that's never won a Super Bowl but has huge Super Bowl aspirations, to a team that has done nothing but win Super Bowls. But they are in a bit of a transition right now. Last year's Steelers did finish 10-7, short stay in the playoffs. They lost to Buffalo. Key free agency additions, Russell Wilson. We're going to hit on that, if he should even be the starter. Cameron Johnston. This is a huge steal here. Linebacker Patrick Queen from the rival Ravens. Quarterback Justin Fields. That was a trade with the Chicago Bears. They got him for essentially nothing. Cornerback Dante Jackson. Trade with the Panthers. Matt Killebrew. No relation to Harmon. Wide receiver Van Jefferson. Montravius Adams, the speedster, formerly the Eagle, Quez Watkins, stays in the Keystone State. Cordarrelle Patterson, new kickoff rules. He's going to be fun. And a very solid journeyman quarterback in the form of Kyle Allen. He will be holding a clipboard and running film study. Short and sweet. You know how you said I can't bet against the Chiefs? I can't bet against Mike Tomlin for one thing. He will not put out a team that is a loser no matter what the hell's going on. But I will say this. If there is too much of a reluctance to keep Russell Wilson in too long this year, I do believe the Pittsburgh Steelers will miss the playoffs. I think Justin Fields has too much to offer to not be your starter. He's the one with the upside. Patrick Queen is really an awesome wrinkle in that defense, joining TJ Watt. I mean, that is just going to be something to behold. Najee Harris, last couple of years, has been slowed by injuries. I think it's to a point now where we got to ask ourselves, is Jaylen Warren really coming for that one spot? So the key free agent losses here. Deontay Johnson, by just sheer luck, will be the number one receiver for the lowly Panthers. Mason Rudolph, the nut hugger, he is a Titan now. Wide receiver Allen Robinson joins my Giants for a few more days in camp before he gets released. Cornerback Patrick Peterson, interesting, still a free agent. He's getting old. Mason Cole, free agent. Keanu Neal, free agent. Presley, not Percy, Presley Harvin III is a 49er. Chuck Wuma Okafor is a New England Patriot. And
yeah. Look, this Steeler team to me, all right, when I think of them, I think of a defense. And they have been a great defensive team for years. And then you go out and get Patrick Queen. And not only did you get Patrick Queen, but you got Patrick Queen from your bitter rival. That is a huge addition. But then I also look at them going out and drafting and adding Peyton Wilson to that linebacking core. He's going to be a rotational player early on, but I think Peyton Wilson is going to be a starter for this defense for a very, very, very long time. But what I think is holding this team back are two things. One, they still don't know who's going to be their starting quarterback. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields have not looked that great in preseason. Russell Wilson went on record and said, hey, look, we're going to play our final game, and we'll see what happens. But I think what this team needs to do, we know that they have the agreement with the 49ers to get Brandon Ayuk, but you're not paying a quarterback. Pay Brandon Ayuk that money. Give him that extra million or whatever he wants and get him over there, because if you can team George Pickens and Brandon Ayuk together, I think that opens everything up for that offense. We saw them address the offensive line during the draft. I mean, bringing in Zach Frazier, who I thought arguably could have been the best center in this year's draft. I mean, Jesus, you have Darnell Washington.
Somebody's going to fall off. It might be two somebodies. But I think a lot of Pittsburgh's ceiling hinges on whether or not they can complete that offense. Because one thing that we saw last year watching Steeler football, now granted you have two better quarterbacks now in that quarterback room. Watching the Steelers last year, offensively, they were limited. They were legitimately limited last year. And, you get rid of Matt Canada. We'll see. But right now, I'm not overly enthused with all of that the offense. I believe that because of the fact that their defense is so good, they're going to be able to compensate. But I do think Jaylen Warren this particular year is a come-out party for him. I do.
Yeah. Well, the only thing that worries me about Jaylen Warren is the fact that he's already suffering with a hamstring injury here in training camp. And it's something that, Mike Tomlin has said it shouldn't follow him in the long term. But, we just can never be so sure. And with a 17-game season, we've seen more injuries the last two seasons than we have for many years. That 17th game does hurt.
But then you're kind of limiting your preparation with the preseason, cutting that down, and guys aren't really all the way in football shape until October.
Exactly, and but the one big thing about this Steelers team is Mike Tomlin. If there's one thing he can do, is he can coach against the AFC North. He had a 5-1 record against them last year.
And this team, Baltimore's number recently, historically, for the most part, they do have Baltimore's number. So that's something else to keep an eye on. I mean, where did
Tomlin's never lost to him?
Yeah, where do the Steelers do in this division? I mean, they did sweep the Ravens last year. Granted, the second game was against a Ravens team that was resting. I think the Steelers are good for 10 to 11 wins. I'm going to go 11-6. I'm going to go 11-6. This is a playoff team. This year, this is a playoff team that's going to do something. Last year, they were a playoff team that you kind of knew they were just kind of holding up a spot. This year, I think they will be potentially one of three teams. We're going to hit on the Ravens. We're going to hit on the Browns. But there is a concern within me that not only the Browns, but also the Ravens could be big disappointments this year. I got the Steelers finishing 11-6. And, let me just Second place. Second place.
The big thing that worries me about this team is when you really look at their schedule, they have to get off to a fast start because it is unheard of that 6 of your last 8 games are against division opponents. Yeah. That's unheard of. So you've got to, you get
a quick start is feasible, but I'll tell you what, they get cracked by Indy. They get cracked. Wait a minute. I might have to renege on this now that I'm looking at this twice.
I have 11-6 as well. I do. I because I look at the way they're going to start the year. I think they're going to go into Atlanta and escape that one, and I think they'll go to Denver, escape that one.
Have to escape.
Yeah, and I think they'll play Los Angeles.
In the year's another big one.
Mm-hmm. But you really look at their first 10 weeks, it's possible that they only have 2 losses on that schedule. But then
the 2 weeks that you don't play a division rival, you get the Chiefs and the Eagles.
Yeah, exactly. But luckily you get the Chiefs at home. You got to go to Philly, and we don't know what Philly's going to be like at that point, week 15.
I also think that's that bad for the Steelers. They're still in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and the Steelers we know is like the Cowboys, like the Packers, like the Niners. They travel very, very well. I fully expect the Steelers team to get off to the fast start, to be in position where come week 11, once that gauntlet of 6 division games and then Philly and Kansas City happens, they go 4-4. They're still an 11-6 team. I have an 11-6 team with them. I have them as a second place team, and I also have them as a playoff team this year.
Half of their losses will occur in the division.
Yeah, and if I look at it, I have said what I think the one thing with this Cleveland Browns team that's holding them back is the play of Deshaun Watson at quarterback, and not to mention, what is Nick Chubb going to be like this year? But they have a stellar defense, but the Steelers have a stellar defense as well. I like the Steelers' run game more going into this season, but I think if they're going to sweep a team this year, it's going to be the Browns, and I wouldn't let it go past me that they sweep Baltimore as well, because Mike Tomlin has never lost to Lamar Jackson. He never has.
Yeah, it's pretty wacky when you think about it like that. Yeah, we're going to get to the Ravens. I think they're the wild card, not literally, but the one in terms of figuring out. I'm on the same wavelength with you with these Cleveland Browns. We know what they did last year. Joe Flacco comes off the couch, lights it up. Now he's backing up AR-15 over in Indy. Jameis Winston, in my opinion, a quality pickup because he might actually get some real playing time. Darius Smith, the often traveled veteran. Tyler Huntley knows this division very well, the former Raven. Running back Deontay Foreman and running back Naheem Hines. This is the organization saying, we are not completely all the way in on Jerome Ford, and we don't know how long Nick Chubb's going to be out. We know what this team does on defense. They are a very good unit, and Kevin Stefanski gets the most out of these guys, no matter what's going on from the injury front. Even going back to when Odell Beckham was a featured part of this offense in his younger years, and he was often injured. This is a team that always rises to the occasion, but this is not the year that they're going to rise. I got them with a losing record this year, actually. This might shock some people. I got the Browns going 7-10. I think that life without Nick Chubb is not going to be pleasant, and life with Deshaun Watson is going to be even more less pleasant. I don't wish injury on anyone, but I do believe that due to injury, you may see Jameis Winston quarterbacking this team at some point. And while I think he's a good kid and all, that is less than ideal. You lost a lot by letting Joe Flacco go out the door, in my opinion. I think that he deserved a little more respect from this organization to hang around. But when you break the bank for Deshaun Watson and reset the quarterback market, this is what you got. On so many metrics, they line up with every team in this division. But quarterback is the most important position in the league, and that is why the Cleveland Browns are going to either be 8-9, 7-10. I got them at 7-10. I think they're going to have a very disappointing season to follow up last year's 11-6 campaign.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I look at this Browns team and honestly, I'm really worried about a couple of things. First of all, Zadarius Smith suffering an injury during training camp. Deshaun Watson, Nick Chubb, that's one reason why I have Dallas winning week 1 is because there will be no Nick Chubb, and Deshaun Watson has not exactly shown us that he is the Deshaun Watson of 2019, 2018.
Does that potentially mean you have the Giants winning week 3?
No, I actually think that's going to be their first win of the season.
So they're going to give us our first loss of the season, is what you're saying.
That they're going to give you guys your second or third loss of the season. Sorry to say, but they got to go to Washington. That's not going to be an easy game. They got to go to Philly. That's not going to be an easy game. Joe Burrow this year is going to be hunting. I think they're going to get swept against the Steelers. They got to play Kansas City. They got to play Miami. But the one good thing about that game is it's at home.
It'll be nice
in December. Yeah,
and that's part of
our cold.
That's part of our pre-subscribed notion that Miami's going to be on that late season slump, and that could be a big loss for them. At Jacksonville, that's not exactly a walk in the park either. At the Raiders, the Raiders are capable.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of it has to do with nothing against TJ Ford. I would much rather have a healthy Nick Chubb over a healthy TJ Ford. While he did step in very nicely last year in his absence, I will give it to the Browns too. Their receiving core did get a little better going out and trading for Jerry Jeudy. But again, your quarterback is Deshaun Watson.
And I'll be honest with you, I think Cooper is going to be very frustrated. And another guy who's going to be frustrated no longer playing with Flacco, now playing with Cooper, is going to be David Njoku.
Yeah, David Njoku. We're talking about a top 5 tight end, but I think a big reason why Cooper – do I want to use the word disgruntled, which will lead to frustration, is when your team openly made it clear that they were trying to trade for Brandon Ayuk and you were going to be in that deal. So it's like, do you even want me here? We saw what happened in Oakland. For some reason with Cooper, year 3, he always comes down.
If somebody's trading me to go to the 49ers right now and to get the hell out of the mistake by the lake, I'd be thrilled.
Absolutely. I'd be thrilled too, but the trade never happened, and now I got to play for that mistake by the lake, So, I look at this team, and you said 7-10. That's exactly where I have them as well.
Wow.
I think they're 7-10. Yeah. Yeah, no, I do, man. And I think they're going to get off to an 0-2 start. I think it's going to – they have a dreadful schedule, and it's just really hard to get excited for this team. It really is. If they had Joe Flacco starting this year, I'd be more excited for them. And, and it's crazy, too, because –
if they didn't have to play the Giants week 3.
Jesus.
No, I'm not trying to be a nice guy. I actually believe that week 3, no Chubb, our defensive front, we might win an ugly one.
In the dog pound? It's possible.
We might find a couple of white jerseys to throw to. Or actually, we might be wearing blue because the newer trend in the NFL is that the home teams wear the lighter colors earlier in the year.
That's going to be the game of who has less turnovers, Daniel Jones or Deshaun Watson. Let's put it that way. But to go back to Deshaun Watson, if you do look at the way he started the year last year, he didn't have a good start statistically speaking, but they were 4-1 before his injury.
Indeed.
So, but this year you don't have the luxury of handing it off to that big fella in the backfield in Nick Chubb. Now you're going to have to do
what they do. That's a big part of your identity. That's a big part of your toughness, your soul, your heart. That's a big loss. And he will contribute this year at some point, and he might be a good guy to stash on your fantasy bench. But too many obstacles in front of this team. Kevin Stefanski's a good coach. He has all my respect, but it's going to be a long one for Cleveland. They could come back next year potentially better. This year, it's going to be a long ride. And, if you find out that Deshaun Watson's not that guy, knowing what you paid him, there could be some headaches in the future for Cleveland.
That Deshaun Watson contract, in my honest opinion, is going to go down as the worst contract, not in football, but in sports.
I mean, dude, it's pretty damn bad when you consider that the guy hadn't played football in forever. He had the good 2020 season, but let's keep in mind there were no fans in most arenas. Now you had all the allegations, all the off the field shit. You come back, to your point, you were winning, but you weren't playing great. And a guy comes off his couch after 5 or 4 quarterbacks. You know, it took a rare set of circumstances for Joe Flacco to start another NFL game. And it was a magical run for him. I mean, it ended abruptly in Houston. I think a lot of us had Cleveland beating Houston a second time last year, given the kind of game that he had the first time against them. But I must admit, the schedule isn't on their side. Your bell cow is hurt. Nobody knows what Watson's going to give. But everybody knows what you got going on at quarterback around the division otherwise. And for that reason alone, the Browns missed the playoffs, 7-10. But it's not the end of the world. They might be back. Now, from the current Browns to the former Browns, we've got the Baltimore Ravens. 2023 record of 14-3. 2 of those losses were to the Steelers. Won the NFC North. Lost in the AFC Championship to the Chiefs. They beat themselves in that game. Key free agent additions. Running back Derrick King Henry. Justin Matabuke. Quarterback Josh Johnson, one of the most traveled quarterbacks ever. Linebacker Kyle Van Noy. Offensive tackle Josh Jones. Linebacker Chris Board, just kind of letting the viewers see who we got here. And I'm also going to let them look at some losses, and then we'll take a peek at the what they did in the draft. I'm going to let you elaborate a little deeper on this, but I'm just going to touch it on the surface. I have one legitimate concern with a run-first offense, and also with the ever-growing need to continue to evolve Lamar Jackson as a pocket passer. Is Derrick Henry going to be more detrimental or beneficial for Lamar? And I think that's a 50-50 question right now, because while it's great to have a guy that can take some off you with the running game, you still got to throw the ball, and you still got to be able to make those throws. And while Lamar Jackson is a phenomenal talent, I am still not completely convinced that he has honed his game completely to be that pocket presence like some of his other contemporaries, like a Joe Burrow, like a Josh Allen, like a Patrick Mahomes. So it is moderately concerning, if you ask me. And Zay Flowers, he has a lot to prove after last year's blunders in that title game. They all have a lot to prove. You know, Jim Harbaugh was outcoached last year.
Yeah, and I think that's been the story of Jim Harbaugh's career, is outcoached. You know, you look at Mike Tomlin has outcoached him on numerous occasions. You have to also remember something that you did not talk about, but when we're talking about key losses, there's a certain offensive coordinator that now is the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks.
Yes,
that's a huge loss. And
we slightly mentioned this year, Patrick Queen.
That to me,
that's worse than Saquon leaving the Giants.
That's yes. I think losing Mike McDonald, losing your OC, losing a guy that knew how to operate with Lamar and all that, I think is going to come back and haunt this team more than anything. Can Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson coexist with each other? Yes, I do think they can. However, this is not while Derrick Henry has proven his time and time again that dude's a freak of nature, he's also going against Father Time, and he is a running back. He's going to be a year older. Mark Andrews is coming off of an injury from last season that had him sidelined for most of the year.
Has to be very thankful that they still have Isaiah Likely backing him up.
Absolutely. But I look at offensively, I don't like the receiving core. Yeah, Zay Flowers is a good, talented receiver.
Neither.
No, but I mean, you're going to tell me Rashad Bateman that he's a great receiver. What has this first round pick done in his career to say he is? He hasn't done anything. He's a first round bust.
I'm going to be very blunt with you, Zap. Now, we know that Odell Beckham is not who he used to be. I do think there's a resurgence coming his way in Miami because of his teammates and because of the style of play. Having said all that, he was the best route runner on this team last year by far.
Yeah, he really was, man.
He was a good teammate. I will give him that. He has matured. Now he's a Dolphin. But I'll be honest, not so much on the stat sheet, but from a locker room level, I actually think you lose a bit with Odell moving out of that locker room.
Absolutely. And then when you really break down this team, I really think that the loss of Patrick Queen on the defensive side of the ball is going to really, really hurt them in the long run. But when you look at their schedule, man, to start off the year, if you take away the Raiders week 2 at home, that is a deadly schedule. At Kansas City, Vegas at home, at Dallas, Buffalo, at Cincinnati. Washington's not going to be a pushover. Got to go to Tampa, then at Cleveland. I mean, gosh, man, they have
I'm smelling a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah. And, honestly, man, when I looked at the Ravens last year, I was never once impressed with them. They may have been the quietest winning team out of all the teams that made the playoffs.
Well, they had some dubious losses, like that one to the Colts at home. That was a dubious loss. In my opinion, playing division rival Pittsburgh, they just didn't look like they were better than Pittsburgh. And I get it. They have a better record, and they didn't have to be better in order to win that division. But Baltimore lacks something. I am not quite sure what it is. Is it Lamar himself? Lamar has had limited playoff success. We spoke on Harbaugh getting out-coached. You got some aging stars, Andrews, Henry. Both guys are susceptible to getting dinged up this year in a big way. And you yourself said that you're not the biggest fan of the receiving corps. I myself am not either. I'm looking at the schedule. I think they are a bubble 7 seed, but they are in danger of being pushed out. I got them as like a bubble 7, possibly missing out. This might come as a surprise to some of our viewers, but in Madden, I'm sure they're a lot of fun.
And honestly, I think it comes down to week 4, their game against Buffalo.
Is that at Buffalo?
It's in Baltimore.
It's in Baltimore.
Because I have said I think the Buffalo Bills are going to be a bubble 7 seed, and I think the Baltimore Ravens are going to be a bubble 7 seed. I don't think it's really hard to envision this division getting 3 teams in, considering that the Jets should be a bounce back team this year.
But let me ask you this, and it's funny you said the Jets because they were burning on my brain right when you said their name. Is the AFC East going to be the reason why the North doesn't send 3? And does the AFC East themselves send 3? Because on our show, I recall picking the Jets to win that division, if I'm not mistaken. And I think I had Buffalo finishing 2nd and just sliding in. So where does that leave the Ravens?
I think the Ravens are going to be on the outside looking in this season.
I have a suspicion that it might go down that way. The question is, are they 10-7 and looking in, or are they 9-8 looking in?
I think they're 9-8. You look at their schedule. I think they're going to start off the year 1-2, losing at Kansas City. I think they lose at Kansas City, and I think they lose at Dallas this year. They'll win against Vegas. They should win against Vegas. But they'll split with Cincy. Pittsburgh, we don't know. But that Week 17 game might be the difference of them being 9-8 or 10-7 too, when they're going to have to travel to Houston.
And let me tell you, once again, having some fun with it. It's always an important game. Every week's an important game. But can Dak Prescott become the 2nd NFC quarterback to defeat Lamar Jackson? Because only Daniel Jones has done that.
No, there's one other one. I'm trying to remember who it was. He's lost 2 NFC games. But no, I look at Week 17, man. That's a revenge game for Houston. We saw, I just don't I don't like Baltimore this year, man. I really don't. I didn't like them last year. Defensively, they're going to be good. But again, Patrick Queen not there is going to hurt them. But, going out, they did draft the cornerback to come in and help out that room. Ah, man.
It's a little disconcerting because I get it. You got Derrick Henry. But I guess there's a part of me that feels like maybe this is a move you should have made 2 years ago.
Yeah, you know what? That's a very good point. That is a very good point. That is a move. If they would have had Derrick Henry last year.
Oh, yeah. And listen, I'm not saying that we can't be wrong and that they're not good enough to maybe swap out with Pittsburgh. And maybe Pittsburgh's on the outside looking in. But when I really think about it, especially if that trade comes to fruition and Ayuk goes over to Pittsburgh, I think you could make a logical argument that Pittsburgh just at that point has a better roster.
I guess the only thing that the Ravens have better is Lamar. And it's so crazy that we're sitting here hating on Lamar because he's a 2-time NFL MVP, but as much hate Dak gets in the playoffs, Lamar should be getting just as much.
And truthfully, I don't dislike Lamar. It's just that, and he's earned those MVPs. He's gotten them the unconventional way from a statistical value. I think my concern is we know that he's athletic. We know that he's a game changer. We know that he's a winner. The guy wins a lot of games. But does that guy possess the intangible that will one day make him a Super Bowl champion? And I must say, brutally honest, I don't think so. I think you'll see Josh Allen hoist a Lombardi before you see Lamar Jackson do so. That's saying something because Josh Allen has had his fair share of issues beating Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, and, and the other thing is, man, Lamar really, if you're going to build your game around him running the ball, okay, it's going to come back and haunt you in the playoffs. Can he become a
getting at it? Let me ask you this. What happens in the rare case, because it does happen a couple of times a year to anybody, no matter who you are. What happens if you have that rare Lamar interception, a pick six, or maybe a fumble, just something stupid? All of a sudden, you're down 10 to 13 points. Where does Derrick Henry fit into this?
That's a good point. I mean,
in Tennessee, where he has been written out of the playbook. Now, I get it. Baltimore has – because I'm an old school guy. I'm of the belief that if you're down 2 scores and you got a bell cow like that, run your way back into the game. In previous teams in Tennessee, whether it was Ryan Tannehill, whether it was Marcus Mariota, or more recently what they were working with Malik Willis and then Will Levis, Derrick Henry can get taken out of games. And that's a concern of mine also if I'm a Baltimore fan, where I think as a guy like maybe a Saquon Barkley would have been a better fit for Baltimore. Or maybe there were other backs.
I think it would have been Saquon was the better one.
Yeah, there were other backs though that could have been, and I'm not saying it's not going to work, but I gotta see it to work before I'm just going to anoint this team. Because a lot of times when teams win, quote unquote, free agency, you get a lot of early season overreactions. But I'm always going to put my money on consistency over the new flavor. And one thing that's consistently happened is that Pittsburgh always kicks their ass.
Yeah. It's, if Lamar comes out and he becomes that pocket passer and he throws for 45 to 4,800 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions, and hey, he's got it, but he just doesn't have the weapons to do it.
Of greatness with that metric. But at the same time, he's reverted back to, we saw the AFC title game. You got to tip your hat to Steve Spagnuolo. I mean, I know how great that man is. He's responsible in a large part to one of our 4 Super Bowl victories, the third one, shutting out the greatest offense in NFL history at the time, possibly the greatest offense in NFL history even to this day.
He's responsible for shutting down two of the greatest offenses in NFL history in the Super Bowl, that being the Niners last year and then the Patriots in '07. Let's just be real about him.
Absolutely. And we know they have players, but it takes the coach to get them to that level. And Steve Spagnuolo is every bit of that. And like I had alluded to earlier, when I said Harbaugh got outcoached, he got outcoached by two guys. Because having a Spagnuolo is so invaluable. It's almost like just making a baseball reference. When I think about my Yankees of the 90s, when Joe Torre had Don Zimmer sit next to him. It's that kind of advantage that you have over others.
No, I definitely agree, man. Look, I look at this team. I look at the rest of the AFC. Obviously, we think they're right there, borderline 7 seed. You know, if we really break it down, AFC West, I think they're going to have one representative, but I think the Chargers can be in the argument, in the conversation as a 7th seed.
Of course, we got to see how things shake out with the plantar fasciitis now with Justin Herbert. He's already had the rib thing. I will say this, and you know, we'll do the the West in the near future. I really like the Gus Edwards pickup for that particular offense. I actually think he's going to do rather well in Los Angeles. If that, you know, it's going to be a process to see how this plays out with Harbaugh, Herbert, rebuilding a roster because you did lose some veterans, but veterans that I think it was the responsible thing to let them walk and join other teams.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And, you know, and the other thing too, when you look at the AFC compared to the NFC, the AFC, it's a lot closer.
Dude,
look at all the teams.
Does not guarantee you entry into the playoffs if you are an AFC team.
It does not at all. And I mean, we haven't even mentioned the Dolphins. They could be a fringe 7 seed as well.
Yeah, it's going to come down now. On our AFC show, if my memory serves me right, I picked the Jets to win, and I think Buffalo, I had them flirting around a 6 or a 7 seed. I had the Dolphins, similarly to these Ravens, missing the playoffs.
That's where I'm at with you. I have the Dolphins missing, Ravens missing, Steelers getting in, Bills getting in, and then also because the AFC South, I think they're going to have 2 representatives this year, or could have 2 representatives this year in the playoffs.
Because we have a high opinion of Jacksonville. We actually picked them to both make the playoffs. And once again, that was another fringe team, the Texans, that I was kind of teetering on. So basically, Richie has to make his mind up and say, okay, which of these teams is getting in? And if I'm really going to be honest, and just off the top of my brain in this very moment, I guess I'll have to cave and put the Texans in the playoffs.
Oh, wow. So I have 2 in the AFC East, 2 in the AFC North, 1 in the West, 2 in the South. I know, it's a tough one.
Jaguars, no particular order. We're just naming division winners. Jets, Jaguars, Chiefs, and Bengals. That's 4. We think the Steelers are going to go. That's 5.
I think the Steelers will be the 5 seed.
That only leaves 1 team. Interesting. So you got Dolphins, you got Texans, you got Ravens.
You have the Colts. You have you have so much. There's going to be. I think the AFC. We're going to see a lot of teams finish 9-8.
Yeah, and then if you get that dreadful tie, a tie could actually mean something.
It might actually, yeah. It's going to be the tie that helps you or buries you.
Yeah, and there ain't much in between. We are coming up on the final minute. Zap, any thoughts on the way out?
I want to see this AFC North get back or continue what they are and being that punch you in the mouth style of football. I want to see the Bengals-Browns rivalry, the Steelers-Ravens rivalry. I want to see it continue to live up to that tradition and make these fans wanting more. I said the NFC North is going to be the most exciting in the NFC. I think the AFC North is going to be the most exciting in the AFC.
And with the emerging Atlanta Falcons in the NFC South, that might surprisingly be more interest than we were bargaining for. One thing I will say is that the AFC North is going to go back to doing one thing that they used to always do, and that's beat the shit out of the Cleveland Browns. And how about those Yankees today? This is a pre-record, so you'll have to just be like, wait, what are they talking about? Aaron Judge won Buckham tonight. So did Juan Soto. For Mr. Zappy, I am Richie. Thank you so much.